The thing about fighting games and Star Wars is that a majority of fans can't enjoy the marriage of these two concepts. This boils down to the misuse of the greatest weapon of all time, the lightsaber. An elegant weapon for a more civilized age. Back when it was introduced, it was rarely used as it was an overpowered sword with many uses. It can deflect blasters, and most importantly, it can cut down most things with ease. Usually when two lightsaber wielders go head to head, it's a very dramatic and or sad moment. Someone is bound to leave a piece of themselves behind. You don't just walk away from a saber duel. Putting a weapon like that into a fighting game can be problematic, especially for Star Wars fans. The lightsaber has been disrespected and undermined mostly by Disney in recent times. What once was a dangerous sword has now become nothing more than a baseball bat. However, I'm not here to discuss the state of the franchise. I'm here to discuss Star Wars and fighting games. I actually went out of my way to grab these classics myself to see how well they've aged and hopefully understand why they've stayed in the past. Should these games be remembered, or should they stay in a galaxy far, far away?
I have a very bad feeling about this.
The first game I want to talk about is Star Wars The Force Unleashed. Of course, its main release for the PS3 and 360 did not contain a multiplayer mode. However, it also launched on the Nintendo Wii. The Wii version of this game is drastically different, from the intro level to the poor graphics and choppy script. It's safe to say that this shouldn't be your first pick when it comes to experiencing this story. The one thing that keeps this version from being a complete disaster is its combat. I didn't think I'd be praising Wii Motion waggling, but I actually enjoyed how they handled it. Star Wars and the Nintendo Wii were practically made for each other. You take the most popular weapon that's made to be swung, and you put it on the platform that almost always requires you to swing at the TV. It's a match made in heaven.
Oh, jeez.
The reason I touched on the main game is because it plays exactly like the co-op mode. The only downside to this mode is that you can't play with a CPU. You are forced to have a second remote to continue. It's unfortunate, but if you owned a Wii at the time, it wasn't hard to find someone who would willingly play, especially if you told them that you could play as Qui-Gon Jinn and Darth Maul. The roster for this game mode is crazy big, which is something I can't say for the rest of this list. It is quite surprising to see how many characters there are here. Like, they didn't just grab random Star Wars characters to fill the roster. Except for that one. Who even is that? While yes, the entire first column is taken up by the main character's different outfits, there's plenty of characters here to excuse something that could have been a simple skin swap. Just like the outfits you unlock in-game, this entire roster has to be unlocked via the main campaign. If you want all of the characters at once without the requirements, you can use a code to insta-unlock everything in the game. There are individual codes for certain characters, but what you want is the big code, which is Grand Moff. This will unlock every character in duel mode, as well as all the unique costumes for single player. The combat is alright. It plays just like the base game, so if you don't like wagging the Wii remote, then you're not gonna like this versus mode. Some fun facts about this version: Starkiller holds the lightsaber upright, which is different from its AAA counterpart. This is due to the Wii remote needing to be held upright. The PS2 release is also closer to the Wii as they share similar specs. While the PS2 version is missing the dual mode, the PSP release adds it back in. The PSP version also has what it calls historical missions, which are battles from the actual movies. If I'm gonna be honest, I wish I bought this version too, but what do I look like owning the same game 3 times? Don't answer that. The Nintendo Switch received a re-release of the Wii version with the dual mode intact as well as motion controls. If you can get it for a decently low price, it's not a bad idea to revisit this version via the Wii or Switch. With the biggest game out of the way, we can go right into its disappointing sequel, The Force Unleashed 2 for the Wii. Not only did the copy I recently bought not work like the seller said it did, but the roster for the fighting mode got cut more than 50%. The reason why we're going straight into versus mode is because it plays completely different from the main game. Unlike the first installment, the Wii sequel doesn't seem to have any cheat codes to unlock the roster for the versus mode. Also, what is up with unlocking characters in fighting games? I understand unlocking a special character like Akuma or something, but does it have to be the whole roster? After playing some of the campaign, I unlocked almost all of the characters. That last character will never be found because I don't have it in me to play the rest of its campaign. Going from motion controls right into a clunky control scheme sequel threw me off. I also may or may not have had to find other means to get my broken copy to work. When I was researching this game for this video, a lot of people said that the versus mode was the highlight of this game. I can confidently say that it really isn't, or at the very least, it's not worth buying if you're looking for a few fun sessions. It may actually be the worst Smash Bros. Clone I've ever played. It felt rushed in my opinion with how bare bones the combat is. You mash A till you win. There's not much thinking here. The one kinda cool thing that it does have would be the special abilities. They vary in by ability, but most importantly, fun factor. As cool as Vader is to look at in a Smash clone, not even he can save this game mode. With the stages having stage hazards and mid at best abilities, there was some thought put into it, although it felt like it was more of an obligation since it's on a Nintendo console. Just like how adding this game to this video was also out of obligation. The next game on here is yet another disappointment. Star Wars The Clone Wars Lightsaber Duels. I will say when I was younger, I kind of enjoyed this title, even if I couldn't beat it. As an adult though, not so much. None of the strikes seemed like they were my own. Where I was kinda impressed with the Force Unleashed Wiimote waggling, this one is just waggling. The ironic thing about it though is that both Force Unleashed on Wii and Lightsaber Duels were made by the same developer, Krome Studios. Not only did they make both games, but both titles released months apart from one another. The Force Unleashed released in September of 2008, while Lightsaber Duels launched 2 months later in November. How they were able to push out two completely different games out around the same time is a mystery to me. Which kinda begs the question, why didn't they just use the engine from Force Unleashed for the game that only focuses on lightsaber battles? With this title's main focus as a fighting game and nothing else, it decided to implement combos. Now, combos are synonymous with fighters as that's where the coolness and appeal comes from. When it comes to a Wii game where the only remote available to use is a motion controller, I wouldn't expect anyone to attempt them, let alone remember them. I think if this game was just waggling without the combos, it might have been better. Everything just felt so stiff. Also, for a fighting game, the characters talk a little too much for my liking.
You make me sick, you bald-headed banshee.
The Jedi sent you to oppose me?
Your dark side powers don't frighten me.
That coupled with the repetitiveness of flailing for a combo, and you're bound to throw the Wii remote on purpose. I couldn't get very far into this game as I was left slightly frustrated. The footage you see here is literally the entire game. The story was bland and boring, so I didn't feel like it was worth the trouble in completing it.
We will meet again, child.
I warned you, but did you listen?
This next game needs no introduction. I've already talked about it here on the channel on its own dedicated video. You should probably check it out since I'll briefly be covering it here. In fact, I'm only going to touch on the versus mode of the game. Star Wars Revenge of the Sith is what Lightsaber Duels wishes it was. While this game was mainly a story-based title, it was built on a fighting game foundation, so when they decided to add a versus mode into the game, they didn't have to do anything really. The boss fight stages from the campaign were just reused for this game mode, and that's not a bad thing. Every character here is from the campaign too, with a couple of OGs thrown in there for good measure. Of course, this game is not perfect in the same sense of an actual fighting game, nor is it particularly balanced as one, but that doesn't really matter. There are combos here and they aren't hard to remember for most characters. There are also a few intricate strings for certain fighters, although you can have just as much fun with the basics without feeling pressured to learn the rest. This title is what I'd categorize as a simple to learn but hard to master kind of game. It seems to have a small fighting scene and that's better than most fighters out there. If I'm gonna be honest, this fighting mode is good enough to warrant purchasing this game. It does go for decently cheap as of me making this video, but if it ever gets expensive, you can still purchase it on the Xbox store. So yes, it is a backwards compatible game. The only downside is that its aspect ratio is not the greatest. I wish I could continue to gush over this game, but the video must go on.
You are no match for the dark side.
Before we get to the last game on the list, I wanted to bring up an honorable mention, Star Wars Episode 1, Jedi Power Battles. Now the version I will be using is this remastered release on Steam. The reason as to why I didn't buy it physically is because if I did, I'd rather purchase it for the Dreamcast. If you know anything about buying retro games, it's that those titles for that console can be pretty pricey. Not only that, but I do think the remastered version is just the definitive way to play this title, which is
Ironic.
given that the Dreamcast version was the better iteration back in the day, as well as being the foundation for this newer remaster. Jedi Power Battles is an action platformer that goes over the events of Episode 1. Thankfully, I don't have to talk about the main game, as we are only here for the versus mode. Right off the bat, the character select is a bit confusing, but with a few cycles around the selection, you'll get an idea of who's in it. All of the in-game characters from the campaign are all playable in the versus mode. From what I can remember, you don't have to unlock any of these characters in order to play them in this game mode. There are several characters that are exclusive to this game in this roster as well. One thing I will say is that I like the fact that even the enemy and boss characters are playable aside from Darth Maul. It was really enjoyable to just go around and try out all of the various enemy types. By no means are any of these characters balanced. You can get fair fights with certain characters, but even then, it's easy to cheese in this game. There are combos, although it really is just auto combos. Definitely not anything exciting to be considered as a fighting game. Overall, it's an okay mode that was thrown in on top of a much larger game. What I would treat this as is a one-time experience, but nothing to really come back to after that. And lastly, we have Star Wars Masters of Teräs Käsi. This was the game that made me want to start this video in the first place. However, after some troubles with my physical copy of the game, my passion for this video kinda tanked. 2 games that I had bought for this video ended up being duds, this one being the other. I could have bought another copy, but the thing about PS1 games is that they are much more fragile than other generations. So I could possibly be in an endless loop of buying Masters of Teräs Käsi, and that's nothing anyone wants to be stuck in. While it's not a completely broken copy, resurfacing is not really an option. At least, not an option I'm willing to risk. So I put some peanut butter on it and we are good to go. If you are unfamiliar with this infamous title, it is the one and only real official fighting game of the Star Wars brand. Unlike the others in this video, this game was only ever meant to be a fighting title. No extras included, and not as an extra mode itself. I did say that it was infamous, and that's with good reason. The main thing that kills this game are the combos. The combos themselves aren't particularly the problem, but rather the time which they are executed. We can all agree that learning and remembering a combination of buttons is a pain. However, in this case, the window frame in which you are meant to sequentially press them is drastically delayed. It can take what feels like a 3-second buffer before you can even see your combo displayed on screen. That's a lot of Mississippis. Now, since I'm not the greatest at traditional fighters, I really couldn't get a single combo to go through. No matter how hard I tried, I just could not get them to connect, rendering this game pretty much a dud, which is quite unfortunate as this game has one of the coolest rosters in any of the titles in this video, not to mention some neat skins. The potential for this game is through the roof, and honestly, I can see this game being very popular if it ever got a remaster that fixes all of the problems it has. Sadly, as it stands for now, it isn't much to write home about. Still better than lightsaber duels. The debate on whether or not Star Wars characters should be in a fighting game is drastically overanalyzed. If video games were more realistic, they wouldn't be fun. If a player chooses Akuma from Street Fighter, they should win 99% of their matches based on the character's lore. If Soul Calibur was based in realism, then it should only take 1 or 2 strikes to defeat your opponent. I could go on, and my point is, video games have to bend reality and even its own story to make certain things more fair and fun for the players. Fighting games are unique in the way that they are specifically made as a sandbox. You have a vast selection of characters to choose from. After your selection, you get to decide the playground in which they fight in. None of it needs to make sense. These characters are just toys in a toy box that we are allowed to use however we see fit. So, the next time you see a crossover character in a fighting game, maybe be a little open-minded, and maybe, just maybe, we will get another Star Wars fighting game. With that being said, thank you for watching and enjoy the rest of your day.